According to Obi-Wan, using a blaster is so uncivilized. Well, here's my very civilized and well thought out counter argument. I've experienced the defensive mindset in my defense only challenge, and let me tell you what I learned from that. Agony. All I gained from that playstyle was suffering, and you know what the Jedi say happens when you suffer. It's time to embrace the dark side of the Force, pick up the quintessence of uncivilized, and throw away any urge to defend myself in the challenge to beat all of Jedi Survivor without blocking, and only in blaster stance, all the while on Grandmaster difficulty. Thing is, the blaster stance is locked behind hours of story, unless we play on New Game Plus mode, which comes with the terrible tragedy of starting me out with extra health and tons of skill points. You know you're a challenge gamer when it brings you pain to see good things happen to you. Either that, or it's time to see a therapist. Likely both. But to bring balance to this run, I'll leave the warrior perk activated all game in order to spawn more annoying and difficult enemies throughout. Sith thrive on suffering, and I'm ensuring I'll have a Star Destroyer's worth of it. I don't want you to catch any of this unexpected pain, so here's a spoiler warning. And with that, let's go make the galaxy a little less civilized. Usually, you'd think you'd have to wait to get past the intro and retrieve your lightsaber before you ever run the risk of dying. But I'm really special. My god, man. Losing to a raging scout trooper before the game can even truly start, while everyone else just ignores us, is great makings for a villain origin story. If that wasn't bad enough, the first fight forces single saber stance only. At least they don't seem to get that jumping down. Doesn't seem to be working out. But to be fair, I can't seem to get that blocking with my face instead of dodging isn't too bright either. Not a good sign that this is the first fight and I just used 8 out of the 9 healing stems I've started with. I really hope this stuff isn't addictive, but I somehow doubt I'm that lucky. At least now I have my blaster and suddenly have the biggest brain blast of Cal's life, as he has a huge epiphany on how to do tons of new moves in blaster stance, all within the span of a minute. It's the greatest rush of dopamine I've ever experienced in my 25 years of life, and I will spend the next 97 years I'm alive seeking to duplicate it. I get another dose of it in the next fight when I'm able to unleash a flurry of attacks on this shield trooper. These guys were the bane of my existence in my defense only challenge, so I'd like to call this free therapy. Less swell for my mental health is entering into a room for a free tanning experience. Here's where things get annoying, as it turns out Cal has something real frustrating called survival instincts and a wish to stay alive. I know, it's bizarre to me too, but when sprinting, he will auto-block incoming blaster fire. I can't do much to stop this outright, but I strive to minimize it by dodging forward as often as possible, instead of running, so he won't block with his saber, just his face as I prefer it. That and firing wildly like a madman and rushing with my saber do make for efficient fights, even if I have a tad more holes than when I started. Though it's not always smart to cosplay as SpongeBob since I don't have his regenerative ability to go along with it. At least I really don't need them for the most part with my always handy stims to keep me going. Gotta love those stims. Too bad I can't inject them into my friends when we're ambushed. I mean, I probably could, but I'd rather not share. While share my stims, I'm more than happy to share my suffering. I then run right into the ever-lovely rageful sight of the ninth sister. Sis over here is very intimidating. Much like 4 bean and cheese burritos, 4 soft potato tacos, and 3 black bean chalupas from Taco Bell can see when sitting right in front of you all together. But much like them, I just ignore any stabbing pain and get to chomping through her health bar. Only problem is why I don't usually need twin blades to finish the food, the game does force me to use them to finish off the ninth sister. I still don't block and I've beaten her first try, but it's just not the same without the acrid smell of blaster fire clogging my nostrils. It's a bit worrisome that I almost take as much damage falling moments later as I did from her. Can you blame me? I need a better look at the wanted poster of me. That's such an old look of mine, and frankly, the lack of facial hair isn't doing me any favors. If the Empire's gonna hunt me, the least they can do is get my wanted poster right. I look far hotter now. Admittedly, not as hot as Anakin, but still. Escaping Coruscant, I craft a blade to represent my newfound ideals, then crash on Koba to test out my lack of principles on the local populace. Despite not being able to block anything, my aggressive negotiations are really working for me, allowing me to scrap any threat quite quickly, unless that threat happens to be a massive raging beast with a hobby of turning Dark Jedi into a flat Stanley copycat. I wonder if Darth Vader ever has to run in circles like Scooby-Doo in order to avoid dying. But hey, maybe if he did more hit and runs like this, and less challenging the high ground, he wouldn't be in a walking iron lung. I'm just saying. It allows me time for a nice walk with my Mogu friend, and like all my friends, get attacked by him. But that's cause, also like all my friends, I stab him in the back first. It also means I have zero trouble running away when things don't go my way. It worked for Dooku, Grievous, Maul, and Ventress. Surely I'm allowed to also without being less cool. I find a chest underwater I'd never noticed before. Perhaps that's for good reason. He's spasming! This is a terrible way for Cal to go. I just want the contents of this chest. Is that too much to ask? Oh good, now it opens. Now I can have some new pants, along with my newfound phobia. This deal is getting better all the time. I try to recruit an apprentice, but the first guy I try with can't seem to get the hang of balancing. Why is it every time I try to make a friend, they fall to their deaths? Can't be my fault, surely. If only he had lived, he'd be able to see me beat this beast so hard that its body defies gravity. The Force is truly a mystery to me. What isn't a mystery is how satisfying it is to smash through fight after fight with sheer aggression. I need a real challenge, so time to release Dagan Gera, the crazed ex-Jedi, to fight me. Except, oh no, he's got a red lightsaber too. There can only be one. Well, okay, the Sith prefer twos, but two is one too many for me, especially with how unworthy of a fight Dagan is. I'm fighting with one arm tied behind my back, and well, okay, he's missing a whole arm, but that's no excuse. He should still kick my butt given his power level and ripped abs. But nope, turns out dramatically walking at me isn't a very smart move, and lets me keep pulling off hit and runs. Sure, he hasn't used his legs in over 200 years, but that won't stop me from taking advantage. With him defeated, which means I'm defeated cutscene-wise, I'm off to Jeddah to fight some crabs. I think I might be here for other things too, sure, but most importantly, the crab fighting. And of course, Merrin, my amazing, perfect love Merrin. Little embarrassing that the first thing I do is get whacked right in front of her. I can only hope having 12 consecutive concussions will make me more attractive to Merrin. But I doubt Cal will be coherent enough to know either way. It's a good thing she's here, because my lack of blocking makes me a truly easy target for an ATST to pick off. Merrin buys me just enough time to get close, so I can stay hidden right underneath it. It leads to not a very epic end to the fight, as it electrocutes me as I try to finish it off, but hopefully, Merrin didn't notice. It's not a proper Jedi Survivor run if I don't get chomped on by my good friend the Rancor. While the Rancor is quite a big lad, he certainly likes to telegraph every move. Not that that stopped me from still dying once, but let's ignore that for my sake. I then lay into the first bounty hunter of the game, who panics me when he almost wins. Maybe tanking a bunch of blaster bolts to the face hasn't been the wisest choice, but at least I can do the same to him, and only one of us is addicted to healing drugs to stay alive. Sure, it's a poor quality of life, but at least I'm still here. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, never mind about being here when I'm immediately stomped on in the next fight by a big beastie. I can't even blame my not blocking here, since it wouldn't work with this guy anyways. He just is fantastic at hitting real hard, and I'm fantastic at mistiming the dodge every time. If I thought that was brutal, it's time to face my hardest fight yet, unexpectedly, against two behemoths trapped in this tiny space. I love knowing exactly when would be a great time to block on these guys, but not being allowed, because I clearly hate myself and want to suffer. Very kind of these fellas to help me out with that. I thought a boss, or a mini-boss, would give me the most trouble, but nope. It's this random fight I've never had issues with before. Perfect. Love it when life keeps me on my toes by putting me 6 feet under. Only by heavily doubling down on the very careful and precise hit and run tactics am I ever able to make it out of there. And I get the wonderful reward of the easiest mini-boss fight with this pirate, who is really not prepared for my onslaught of blaster shots to the dome, followed by aggressive blade work. If I wasn't laughing in delight at how easy this is to win, I'd probably feel bad for him. Just a smidge. Heading off, I discover a Mogu threatening some civilians. But my god, look at him! He's frickin' jacked! I'll let nature work this one out, thank you. No surprise when I get instant death karma by a hyper-aggressive bounty hunter 2 seconds later. But she's not the only one that can be hyper-aggressive. She is the only one who can look cool doing it, sure. But I'm the one that's alive at the end of the day, thanks to plot armor. That armor is key to fighting the next mini-boss on the Shattered Moon, due to, in previous runs, I just deflected all his shots back at him. So this time, I had to be a tad smarter. No, not really. Turns out the very long, hard-hitting lunge of Blaster Stance combined with the constant hitting, then dashing away on the counterattack, makes for an easy fight. Who needs a blaster when I can cover the same distance with the galaxy's longest lunge? The game forces me to use the crossguard stance, but I say, nah, and just run past everyone till I can shove them off the nearest ledge. No saber needed. Back to Jeddah for a second date with Merrin. But oh no! Merrin, don't start T-posing on me! Please! Anything but this! We can still have a life, Merrin! I can't lose you to frickin' T-posing! I don't know whether I should be horrified or relieved you can still move, but I'm going with horror. Maybe if I run far and hard enough, I can bring her back to me. Or maybe the T-posing can spread like a plague into the rest of the game as everything begins to crumble apart. Nice to see the game is taking on the same form as my mind and quickly sinking into indecipherable gunk till I just can't move anymore. But what isn't a minor hiccup like the love of your life freezing up, unable to respond to her surroundings till you sink into nothingness as your world crumbles and darkens around you? It's like a standard day for me. I'm just bothered I got knocked back a good deal upon returning to the now slightly more stable game. And I do mean only slightly more stable, as you can see here. The Force never ceases to amaze me. I almost make it through the rest of the mission without any more trouble, but tragically, Merrin loses to her inner war again and begins to T-pose once more. No surprise when I die moments later without her help, but at least my death serves to get her free. Note to self. Stop trying to rush a bunch of guys with flamethrowers. I literally have the Force and a blaster. But nope, I still try to rush them with my saber. But despite all the setbacks, all the T-posing, deaths, and world-crumbling moments, Cal and Merrin do manage to share a brief, beautiful kiss that always gets a very manly squeal of delight from me, and then I'm off to go fight Dagan Gera for round 2. That is, if I can just power through the endless barrage of shots and droids blocking my way. But once again, Cal's very hard head, plus a plethora of totally not addictive drugs, gets me through it. The big problem with facing Dagan is he's learned to never let up, which really doesn't work for me. I obviously can't block his attacks, so there's no stopping him once he starts laying into me. It's honestly a miracle I only die once to him here. Miracle being what I call my gun, is only through blasting him, then commencing my hit and runs allows me to wear down his defense long enough so that I can defeat him. With him escaping once more, I return to the Shattered Moon for a showdown with Ravis, the pirate leader. I fought this guy practically more than anyone else in my previous runs, and while I definitely have his moves very well memorized, I'm still an idiot who can't block, so it's no surprise when I go down. It is a very pleasant surprise that it's only 5 deaths to him though. Ravis may hit with the force of a small moon, but I have both a good grasp of his moves, plus the ability to keep peppering him with shots so he can't ever have the chance to heal, which is his favorite thing to do. Other than making craters in my skull, that is. Thankfully, the majority of his moves can be dodged and don't need to be blocked, and there's nothing more intimidating than me just tanking his shots before raging at him once more. The next big fight is an Imperial listening post, and I'm very pleased to beat this on my second try. Would have loved to have been my first try, but I committed the cardinal sin of getting stuck in a corner, which is the worst place to be when your entire strategy relies on hit and runs, or dirty dancing. I then have an epic fight against the almighty Rick the Door Technician. It's over, Rick. I have the high ground. Don't try it. I said don't try it. Oh, well, he's really not trying it. All right for me. Time for the 2v1 against Dagan Gera. And you know something? Spending over 11 hours fighting this guy in my past 2 runs and having the capacity to let out all the aggression makes this fight actually quite simple. I barely even have to heal here, with his duplicates being easy to shoot away, and he himself always falling for the old hit and run trick. Whoever said the best defense is a good offense really was onto something, as I managed to beat Dagan Gera on my first go-through. Truly, one of the most satisfying moments of my life. And that probably says something bad about my life, but I'll try not to think about it. With Dagan dead, I try and shove Bode into this nearby hole, but the man's a frickin' brick. He's not fazed by any of this. I really need to know what workout routine he follows. Maybe a little workout of hunting down every single bounty hunter and beast I can find across the galaxy would do me some good. I know I'm probably missing out on some pretty cool fights. But come on, so many of these guys hang out next to ledges. This is my bad guy era. You can't blame me for this. It's just too irresistible. I still feel a little bad about using this one's girth against him, but no beast caused me more suffering in Fallen Order, so I wasn't about to risk dying to one of these again. We almost got our happy ending, Cal's adorable little family, and we would still if the game would just let me do what must be done. Bode! This isn't the nice kind of body spasm. This is the I'm trying with all I can do to rewrite the timeline spasm. The same spasm I experience every time I rewatch Revenge of the Sith, hoping that things go differently than they do for once. But just like with that, I'm powerless but to watch, as Bode betrays us to the Empire so that he can flee with the key to our new peaceful home. Why put up a better fight this time against him? Bode proves to be the most dangerous foe of all, as he actually knows how to deflect the blaster bolts right back at me, and down I go. Times like this, I miss my crossguard saber. And much like me as a baby, this is where my challenge gets thrown on its head, as I'm forced to play a seer who is far too civilized for her own good. She only has the one stance, the being better and cooler than everyone else stance. And while it really works for her, it's not what this challenge is about. Blocking is still not needed, at least. Then comes the awesome power of Darth Vader, and I really wish I had that blaster. To use on myself, not for him. I honestly thought this would be an easy fight, after getting him to half health with zero trouble. Vader is slow, and I never stop pressing the attack other than to dodge a move and then back to bearing down on him. But the only problem is, halfway through the fight, he remembers he's the real main character of Star Wars and proves it to me over and over again. He's the only character with a lightsaber that actually does tremendous damage like a lightsaber should, and my limbs are not a fan of that. Plus, the grand majority of his moves at this point don't leave any openings, as he will block quite quickly, not letting me hurt him or do anything worthwhile to his block bar. I'd probably stay here in Star Wars hell with him forever, if not for the fact that I realize he can actually be avoided till he uses one specific sequence of moves, leaving him quite vulnerable, and just keep repeating that till I can finish his health off and promptly die to him in the cutscene. Bode's betrayal quickly brings Cal right on his heels in another Imperial base, and yet another momentary setback. The game forces me to give into the dark side, which I'd be more than happy to do, hashtag bad guy era, but doing so switches me into a single blade stance. I have to wait it out, and I'll never use the dark side power up after, but who needs it when I can just bash and blast my way through everyone? I mean, I guess I would need it, since I'm constantly interrupted by their blaster barrage, and it would certainly help. But at least I can pull my favorite move of shoving everyone off of ledges, and then fleeing, while firing every chance I get. Time to hunt down the last of the bounty hunters before I go after Bode, and beat them in epic battles. No, not really. Again, I just resort to shoving them off the edge. I may not be able to block, but I can surely boop everyone into oblivion. Sadly, the second to last bounty hunter group must have heard of my tactic, since they hide somewhere with no ledges. But at least here I can just tank all their hits, inject an unhealthy amount of stims into myself, and constantly throw them off balance by lifting them up and then smashing them into the ground, much like life likes to do to my emotions and expectations. The very last bounty I definitely could have beaten fair and square, and honestly, I did it for the most part, but I'm a rat of principles, or lack thereof I suppose, and that means it just didn't feel right lest I blasted that hunter right off the edge and into oblivion. It's what the Force would want, I'm sure. The last big fight before I remember I'm supposed to be chasing Bode is actually against the lady who sent me after those bounty hunters in the first place. Cage is quite the fighter, and sadly, despite being surrounded by ledges, she has rocket boots to keep me from my favorite tactic, and it's all I can do to weather her shots. If only I had some weapon that can deflect blaster bolts, but sadly, no such thing exists. The key to surviving, I found, was constantly keeping her off balance with a mix of force pushes, blaster shots, and saber slashes. So basically, everything in my arsenal, at a constant, endless rate in order to stop her from shooting me. I don't need a block after all, if she can't ever attack. With her defeat, I'm given the greatest reward of being allowed to squeal in fanboy delight in Boba Fett's shadow. I am such a huge fan, Mr. Fett. I can be an extra layer of armor for you if you'd like. It'd be my pleasure to take any blaster bolts meant for you. Sadly, Boba ignores my perfectly, not at all creepy comments, and with one last look at greatness, I head off to find Bode. First, I have to beat waves of Imperial forces, and while they gave me a lot of trouble last challenge run, pure aggression once again proves to be the best answer for everything. I'm starting to think the Sith might be onto something. All that's left is Bode. While I'm newer at blaster stance, Bode was born in it, molded by it, and truly a master of it. Plus, he can block my bolts, something I can't do back at him. What a cheater of him to not purposely make things hard on himself. The key to beating him, I realize, has been staring at me the entire time. When aggression isn't working, just be even more aggressive. It gives Bode no breathing room to blast me, and the hit and run tactic continues to work wonders. I can't shoot him, but I can and will stab away. And when the game asks me to embrace the darkness, I'm more than happy to oblige. Third phase Bode has no blasters, which should make it a simple win, but I forgot a very key detail. I'm an idiot. So of course, that means I have to pull a shenanigan guarantee and die, literally a hit away from winning. And then die immediately next time, of course, too. But the next try does work out, since he always leaves himself open when he uses this particular move, making for a much easier win against him than I expected to. With Bode's betrayal dealt with, and his orphan daughter properly mentally scarred, nothing to do but pose in the hallway and say, huzzah! I've beaten Jedi Survivor without blocking and only blaster stance after 16 hours, 43 minutes, with a total of 69 deaths. As you saw, the game forced me to play without blaster stance 3 times, but otherwise it was more than doable, and you can certainly beat it all without blocking, especially if you don't mind using your face as a catching mitt. Being hyper aggressive is actually a very smart way to play this game, as long as you have the health and willingness to gain a new addiction to stims, that is. I truly hope you all enjoyed watching. Now maybe let your inner dark side out, and go treat yourself to some tasty unhealthy food, or that one thing you're eyeing on Amazon. Papa Palpatine would be proud of you if you did, I'm sure. See you later, friends.